uh, if there is any other scripture that you have uh, noticed that kind of shed some light on this, we can add that to the discussion as well. But from what I could tell, and I called Pastor immediately to look at this, I think Barabbas was the scapegoat. So how we reach that conclusion, we can talk about. And as he mentioned earlier, what Barabbas name means, and we can start at that point with our discussion. But chapter Leviticus 16 really kind of unfolds what atonement supposed to look like, and it led me to like I said, more questions than answers. So I want to know, what exactly is the scapegoat. I know what it says on the page, but looking at it from a deeper perspective, and also what happens to the scapegoat. So, because I don't see anywhere in Scripture, although I've read some commentary from different ministers that talk about the scapegoat being destroyed. I don't see that in Scripture. So, just again, more questions than answers, and hopefully this is something that we can look at and shed some light on. So that's where we are, and if someone has some questions or comment, we can start the discussion from this point.
Yeah, this is Nick. So just reading through some of the scriptures that we were to reference in Leviticus 16, where it gives the sort of procedure for how to handle the scapegoat and the goat that will be used for the offering. It says that you must cast lots for the two goats. In other words, the scapegoat is supposed to be randomly chosen, or it's up to luck which goat is the scapegoat and which one will be the one that is offered in the temple. But one thing I noticed that differs in the New Testament in Matthew is, of course, they did not randomly choose between Jesus and Barabbas. They specifically chose Barabbas. So I think that is an interesting sort of difference between the way it's supposed to have gone and the sort of symbolic fulfillment of those scriptures, which the life of Jesus was.
Nick, that was one of my questions too. As I said, this led me to more questions than answers. So would that mean that the sacrifice itself is null and void because it wasn't done as prescribed by law? Or can casting lot be looked at as something quite different than because I didn't see anything, because that was one of the things I tried to look up. What does it actually mean to cast lots? And the obvious, as you said, just by chance. But as we know, the choice in Matthews was not by chance. So yeah, that was a question of mine too. What does that do to the whole sacrifice that took place?
Well, if we look at it based upon what the scriptures say, what we see is that would not be the first time that the priest deviated from what the law prescribed. as a procedure in regards to the temple. They, I beg your pardon?
Sorry.
They were no different than what it is today, in that they used the Lord as a convenience to them, and then that wanted to get rid of Jesus, so they chose birth. But I think that in doing it, they were fulfilling something that had been divinely appointed without even knowing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm trying to understand what, though. To me, it just feels like a further sort of in ignorance and selfishness, an indictment of the sort of spirit of what the Christ is, and a rejection of it, which to me would just sort of fall in line with the rest of the way Jesus was treated by the sort of religious authority of the day. Another thing I just wanted that to me just sort of stood out was what's the reason for casting, what's the reason for choosing supposedly at random the scapegoat versus the goat that will be used in the offering. I'm not quite sure, but to me, it feels a little bit like the casting lot is some ways like a very crude form of mercy. So that even though you're sort of both heading towards both goats are potentially going to be sacrificed, at least one is saved. And they're sort of not using they're not leaving it up to their own choice in a somewhat crude form of a merciful act. And this might seem silly, but I'm quite sure that the way we pardon turkeys at Thanksgiving is somehow symbolically connected to what this is. But like I said, I just think it has to do with the deviation from law, as you mentioned, Pastor Richard, because they did not leave anything up to sort of divine chance.
In addition to that, while you were talking, what came up in my mind is that suppose for a moment that the deviation was not in Matthew with Jesus, but the deviation was the lot cast in itself. Suppose that it was supposed to have been the high priest supposed to have been the one to choose all along. And the choices that high priest made would be predicated on what that priest felt the universe was leading it to do. For an example, it is my belief that in today's world, the scapegoat is the descendants of the African. And it is my belief that this has been the way of the world ever since the African came in contact with those from and because if we look at what happened with Jesus and Barabbas, you have two African men. One who was arrested for being a robber, among other things, and being arrested at the behest of the priesthood because they were afraid that he was going to mess up their system and going to mitigate the control that they had over the people. So suppose that this was supposed to be the case because of the purpose of the scapegoat, and the purpose being taking on the sins of those who are, of all the people rather. And you look at the scapegoat from the religious perspective, taking on sin, we're talking about all those things that were listed as sin by the Catholic Church and incorporated by all religions who listen to them. Suppose it's simply dealing with the entanglements of humanity, and that scapegoat takes those upon itself and looking at it conceptually. Now, I do have some ideas about that, but I want to share to see where this goes and what you think about it before I go any further. Don't everybody speak at once.
I have like a background question.
That's a miss.
Before we dig too far into this. And if you hear a man talking and laughing, that's my husband sitting next to me. He's on a different call. Sorry about that.
Take another.
We've discussed the fact that we don't believe in human sacrifice. And I'm wondering, Pastor, if you can go over that a little bit before we dig too far into this.
The different with human sacrifice, with the human sacrifice, it is done in order to appease a deity. This crucifixion that was initiated by the priest was not to please the deity, but to remove someone from a space that was being filled with criticism of them meaning the priesthood. How did we get to this place? Well, when the Essenes invited the Romans in, they came in and took over and in doing so, they removed all the priests who were in, and they appointed the priests as well as the high priest. And the purpose of the priests and the high priest were to keep the people in line of the Roman. All religious practices had to be approved. And if they deviated from anything that Roman law said, they were deemed to be illegal. So when Jesus came on the scene and began to rightly divide the word of truth, the priests who were in league with became afraid of what he was teaching because they feared that it was going to result in an uprising. And that's the reason the high priest during that period said that it is more expedient for one to die than all of them. At that point, they made a decision that Jesus was going to be the one to die. And they, according to the Romans, they allowed the Hebrews to choose one person to be released from prison and during the period of Passover. And they did that And what happened, rather than choosing Barabbas, I'm sorry, choosing Jesus, knowing that he had not broken any laws, they chose Barabbas. And the priest didn't do it alone. It had to be the voice of the people. So when the voice of the people chose Barabbas, it was at the encouragement of the priest. Now, as far as the sacrifice is concerned, this was actually more of a punishment for a crime as opposed to human sacrifice to please a deity. So this crucifixion was not about pleasing a deity at all. Even though we are surreptitiously taught that Jesus was sacrificed for our sin, meaning that Jesus would have been sacrificed in order to please a deity because of the sin that we had purportedly committed. Questions about that? Or comments?
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah, Pastor Richard and everyone, you mentioned in reference to the high priest and the chief priest, basically making that decision. I was looking in Matthew, the 27th chapter, and what came to my mind as you were speaking was that Pilate, basically, asked, who shall they release, Barabbas or Jesus? But it was interesting to me that Pilate's wife, in Matthew 27, verse 19, it said, when he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. And then it says, but the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. So I think that, again, for me, it was interesting just to hear, what Pilate's wife had to say. And I was just wondering what was the sufferings, that she had in that dream because of him. But I think that there's something in there that, again, is giving them a warning, in terms of them being able to, make the right decision. But it was just, again, the high priest and the chief priests and elders who persuaded the multitude. So it wasn't as though it was the Hebrews, you know what I mean? They, wanted to choose the right, but I think it was just the people in power, who overrode that decision. That was just a point I wanted to mention. I'm done. And I just wondered what your thoughts about that was as far as Pilate's wife.
I think that is actually telling us, showing us rather, that the deliverance comes through the womb of a female. It is speaking to the wisdom and the just the wisdom and the desire of someone to abide by what truth really is, that being the energy of a female. And I'll carry it a step further. If we look at the overwhelming majority, 99% of all of the decisions that have led us to war and been destructive in this on a global level has come from the desires of males, and the male being extremely destructive when it comes to societies. However, again, when it said that the chief priest convinced the multitude, is not that the people wanted to do this as much as they were pressured into doing it, no differently than it is today. Pastors have authority over the minds and actions of people that people don't even realize. They don't even think about the amount of power that is exhibited by pastors in their lives. Look at people who were manipulated to come back into buildings, i.e. churches, during the height of COVID, because pastors convinced them that it was the godly thing to do. That is no different than what happened with Jesus in regards to the past. If you remember, it was Easter when most of them went back in as if COVID was going to pass over them because it was Easter. So I think that it behooves us to keep that in mind, that particular scripture you just read. But also, it behooves us to remain mindful of the reason that that Jesus was chosen. Now, again, we are talking about, when we talk about Barabbas and Jesus, we have been indoctrinated to the extent that we disconnect them from the reality of who they are in terms of their human identities. When we look at them in terms of their human identities, we see that we are talking about two African men who are arrested by Europeans, Romans, in an African state, in an African nation. And if the wife felt as strongly as she did in the beginnings about Jesus, then her intervention would have begun when Jesus was arrested and beaten to a pulp. It's interesting to note that even though she did not intervene, it was her dreams. It was the divine speaking to her during the periods of sleep, meaning the night before Jesus was crucified, she had dreams. She had intervening dreams that told her that they were going to kill an innocent man. Now, the question is this: if Jesus was not supposed to have been crucified, then why is it that her dreams were not strong enough to intervene with Pilate and change his mind? Why is it that Pilate didn't have the same dreams as did Pharaoh in regards to Abraham's wife when it came to Jesus? That tells me that when Jesus talked about his coming to be crucified, that tells me that there is a deeper story in the crucifixion than has been presented to us. And I do believe that a large amount of the trouble that we've been facing in terms of getting connected today is related to that understanding. I do believe that the chaotic energy that has been guiding this earth realm to a place of destruction is making an attempt to remain what it is, as opposed to being reoriented for a greater purpose. So this whole discussion, I do believe, is opening not a Pandora's box, but opening a gateway of the energy that has the opportunity to bring balance to this earth like never before. Because out of all of us who did the research that we did, or the readings and searching for understandings, one of us came across, to my knowledge anyway, came across anything that even looked like what we are talking about today in terms of why is it the son of Abram was arrested because of being a threat to society, yet the one who called himself the Son of the Human was crucified and had not done anything to justify crucifixion. I'm done.
Pastor, I have a question, and I want to back up to Leviticus for a minute and look at something. In Leviticus, it starts off, and the Lord spoke to Moses, and everywhere in here it talked about Lord. It's talking about Yahweh. My question is, can we have we reached a point, or has man reached a point where he worshiped God his own way and God honors it in a certain way? It's okay. If this is what you've chosen to do in the earth, then I will not change it. Maybe not honor it, but I've told you how to do this. And if you choose to do it a different way, I'm trying to understand this. I'm trying to understand verses 9 and 10 to understand why does the Lord need a sacrifice? Why is this something that is necessary? And we talked about before, if you look at Psalms 51 and 1 Samuel 15, it alludes to the fact that the Lord says, I do not delight in sacrifices. And I'm trying to piece this together. So in Leviticus, then, couldn't it be that this is what the priests were doing, so God honored it anyway? Help me to see this, because I'm kind of stuck there. Anybody?
Hey, yeah, this is Nick. Well, we know that pretty much everything in the Old Testament is sort of a symbolic of what is happening spiritually. So if we look at these sacrifices as not something happening externally and literally, but internally and spiritually, then I think that is a better place to start to sort of understand the true nature of what is going on. But I think there could be references to literal sacrifice in the Old Testament, and it may be that that's where God says, I do not want that. Because I think a lot of this is misinterpreted as being literal, and so the idea that you must sacrifice becomes literal, and then that becomes something that is offensive to the Creator, which it would be. But in terms of the spiritual symbolism, that's where I think the connection between sort of the true nature of the sacrifice, the scapegoat, and then the true nature of the relationship between Jesus and Barabbas comes in. And especially because we just saw, as Pastor Richard said, that Barabbas means literally the son of the father, or son of Abu. And that is a sort of fairly obvious symbol staring us right in the face. So I think the more we can look into how these things are symbolic of spiritual reality, the more sort of truth we will actually be able to get from this.
Hey,
When we, you're right, Nick. Someone, go ahead.
This is Barbara.
Someone's about to say something.
Hey, this is Barbara.
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing duality here again. When you talk about an innocent man who's about to be murdered versus a guilty man who's about to be set free. That's what I see when I see Jesus the Christ and Jesus Barabbas. But if you go back to what a scapegoat is supposed to be, the scapegoat was supposed to be called the sent goat. That was from the Hebrew perspective. And it wasn't called a scapegoat. It was called an escape goat initially. And the escape goat was the sent goat. It was only in the 15th century or so that this guy, who's a Christian trying to decipher Hebrew, labeled it the scapegoat. A guy named Tyndall in the 15th century. He's trying to translate the Hebrew, and he called it a scapegoat, a scapegoat, not escape. So the scapegoat or the sent goat was to be sent out into the wilderness versus the other goat, which was and the sent goat was for the atonement of the sins of Israel. And when you talk about atonement for sins, atonement, the Hebrew word for atonement is kafar, K-A-P-H-A-R in Hebrew. And it means a covering. The sent goat or the scapegoat was supposed to cover the sins of the Israelites. In other words, when the priest put his hand on the head of that goat and he listed all of the sins of the Hebrew nation, the Israelites, then the goat was sent away way into the wilderness. And we don't know what happened. We don't know if it was killed, because if it was killed, why send it in the wilderness and kill it when you could have killed it right there as a sacrifice? So the issue is sending it away so that it's not seen again or heard of again in some way. That part reminded me of casting away our sins as far as the east is from the west. So this, again, back to the duality perspective, to me, the goats, in essence, represent two types of men, if you will, or two types of attitudes, if you will, of men. And again, we're just talking through this. So these are the things that come to mind as I've heard you talk. So if one represents the attitude of obedience, a willingness to follow the teachings of Yahweh, and the other represented one who's proud and who's wants to do things their own way. I think Ron alluded to this, in their own way, how they want to do it, as they want to do it. But if you look at it that way, my limited knowledge of this, the two don't compare, because the sent goat was supposed to bear those burdens and those sins of the Israelites. For instance, symbolically, the burdens of the Israelites were placed on that goat and it was sent away. On the one hand. But on the other hand, the question is bad. I beg the question, then if that goat, if scapegoat has come to mean that a group of people are symbolically thrown under the bus, if you will, or take the brunt, are innocently bear the blame for others. Then the Christ would seem to be the one that innocently bore the blame for others. Since Barabbas was a known seditionist, and the Bible says that he was associated with the murder that occurred. So it looks like some evidence was there. And so if Barabbas is the guilty one, in a sense. Oh, I hear my own echo. I'm sorry, it's taking me a while because I'm working through this just like you guys are. If Barabbas is the guilty one, how is sending the guilty one out to bear, if we symbolically relate it to the goats, how is sending the guilty one out and freeing the guilty one the same as what a scapegoat is? If the scapegoat symbolically took the burdens and the sins of the people. So that's my question. Since Barabbas was not necessarily guilty, and the scapegoat is traditionally seen as that which takes the innocent, which takes the burdens of the blame of others. Those two don't mesh in my mind. Thank you.
But Barbara, what happened is the scapegoat was not killed. Jesus was killed. And suppose for a moment that we're looking at this spiritually. Well, first of all, I do believe that, let me back up a moment. I do believe that a great deal of what happened in terms of sacrifice, God had nothing to do with it. He allowed it to happen as he has done his doings to this day. The Creator has allowed people to, priests, pastors, whatever, to interject things into this way of living that has nothing to do with a foundation in Scripture at all. So that's how I perceive the sacrifice, because there are too many instances, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Micah, where Yahweh says, I did not require a sacrifice of animal sacrifice, and to kill a bullock is no different than killing a man. Now, if the scapegoat carried the sin or the entanglement, and the scapegoat was not killed, was sent into the wilderness, then how is it then that Jesus was killed? Suppose for a moment, right, seditionist, as you stated, but suppose for a moment that because he was a seditionist, his rebellion against the Roman overlords put him in a position of defending himself or making an attempt to overthrow the occupation. And in doing so, he killed someone. Would that be any different then with Nat Trinity,
Please mute
would
your
you
phone.
mute your phone, please?
We can hear the beeping,
Would you
whoever
make
that
sure
is.
phones are muted, please? Hey, we hear you beeping. Thank you. So, what was I?
Suppose he
So
killed
is that
somebody.
any different than what Nat Turner? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with that. I hadn't looked at it from that perspective. I want to back up this something Barbara said too, though, that I think maybe help me see piece this together, okay? Because I'm still having some difficulties with this. Let's suppose that the mirror to this whole thing was Cain and Abel, and Cain killing the innocent man, or backing up even further and saying that the institution of sacrifice was brought in by Abel, and because he was the first one, at least in recording of the scriptures, offered something to the Lord. And maybe, just maybe, God honored it because it was sincere. And man took it and made a religion out of it. And because God had honored it, he could not take that away. He had to continue to honor it, although it was being misused. So the guilty are the one who did not have an honorable position with God, killed the one who did. And what happens to him is he was banished to an unoccupied land. And when that happened, he ended up, a lack of a better term, making something of himself, or making himself a nation, or God allowed him to become a nation. So is that sort of a mirror to what we're seeing now? Is those two things related? What we're talking about, Jesus and Barabbas, as opposed to Cain and Abel? And does that give any credence, I guess, to what the sacrifice was originally supposed to be anyway? And it was pulled out of proportion by those who wanted to have advantage over men. Does that make any sense at all?
It does. I see both Cain and Abel as a foreshadowing, as you stated. I want to raise also, if you look at it, and the reason I give a lot of credence to what you just said in regards to the sacrifice is because I don't remember, and if anyone does, please let me know. I don't remember Jesus for making a sacrifice in the temple. Is there any record of that anyone is knowledgeable of? And a reason for asking that. I don't ever remember Jesus making it. I do remember Jesus paying the tax when he said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, remember? But I don't remember Jesus ever making a sacrifice. Now, if Jesus came to fulfill the law, and those were his stated word to rightly interpret the law, then why is it he would not make a sacrifice at the temple, or provide a goat or a lamb or whatever for sacrifice at the temple? during the period of Passover. That's why I believe that what Ron said earlier about Abel making the sacrifice and Yahweh accepting it because it was sincere, because he spoke to the countenance of Cain, and his attitude, he spoke to his attitude about the sacrifice that he offered. In other words, both of them were making an offering, but there's no record that I know of it being requested of them. If it's voluntary, if it's genuine, the acceptance of it. Now, if we look at what happened with Jesus, then would Jesus not be fulfilling or rightly interpreting the law where it says that Yahweh did not request the sacrifice of any man? Would that not be a fulfillment of it, the fact that Jesus did not make a sacrifice, at least to our knowledge anyway? Now, I take all of that and look at the innocence of it, and I see that that Jesus was also guilty of something as well. If Barabbas was guilty of sedition against the state, the Roman government, then Jesus was guilty of sedition against the priesthood. And he was crucified because the priests believed that he was undermining them. And Barabbas, being a son of Abun, if Abun is who it is, then it's saying that he is the son of the universe. And being the son of the one who created everything that is, that brought everything into existence, being the son of that source, says that by your very nature, you're in a state of righteousness. And here we are with one Yeshua, who is the deliverer, calling itself the son of man, which is translated to be a human. I am a human, the human being killed, but the son of Abun not. Why could it possibly be that taking all of the burdens that have been put upon you by the state and carrying those burdens, you are cast into a wilderness, and by doing so, that scapegoat begins to incorporate into its life a method of bringing the government to a place of bringing the occupiers to a place of balance within themselves, meaning that he went about overthrowing the government the wrong way. And Jesus had the principles for overthrowing the government in a different way. And that was the human has to do it by employing what Jesus taught and not by using the tactics that were used to occupy them in the first place. Barabbas was making every attempt to overthrow the occupiers by using the methods that the occupiers used when they came in there. So would Barabbas not be representative of the spiritual man not knowing himself, not realizing rather the power of himself, and seeking to change the occupiers or change the methods of the government by using those same methods, by going through legislative bodies to change things, or by going to war with them. as opposed to dealing with it from a spiritual perspective, as Jesus sought to do. Now, Jesus was not to overthrow the government. Jesus was teaching how to live the life that we were created to live, and that in itself, not only it didn't necessarily overthrow it, but it changed the hearts of those who were in government. Am I making sense, or am I just talking? Because I do need some help here.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, considering Pontius Pilate, who was considered the governor, organized hunting parties to hunt down religious zealots, and those religious zealots were those who were actually considered as threatening to the Roman Empire. And so from what you're explaining in terms of what Jesus was doing, maybe not in the same way, but in terms of him freeing the people, so to speak, it was freeing them beyond the government, the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire's control. And their power of authority. So Jesus and himself was a huge threat to the whole empire collapsing, so to speak. So no, what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Well, I wonder if Jesus the Christ then did not become the center pillar of the tree of life. And when I say that, I mean balancing the upper realm with the lower realm. Because for me, Barabbas Jesus, to me, Barabbas represented the physical more than, even though I hear what you said, Pastor, it's son of Abun, but he represented more of the physical realm in that he tried to, like you say, overthrow things by physical means. In the death of Jesus the Christ, he combined both of those things. Not only was he the sacrifice for atonement, but he also was the one that was sent, in a sense. In other words, all of the sins of the nation were placed on him. So I wonder if there was a melding of both of those things with the Christ, which negated any further sacrifices.
And I hear what you're saying, that Barabbas was more of the physical nature in terms of what he did and how he thought, was Jesus. Suppose both of them are a message. In today's vernacular, let's see that that Barabbas is the human who doesn't realize that he's the son of Abun. So he organizes SCLC, he organizes SNCC, he organizes the Black Panther Party. He does all of these political things, and his resistance is predicated on bringing a civilized government into place. And here Jesus is saying, these are the ones who the ones you are appealing to are not paying you any attention. You are missing the truth of who you are. You're brought into this earth to actually be the over it. And you have subjected yourself, or you have relegated yourself to being no different than those who seek to destroy you or to subjugate you. And Jesus in physical knew who he was and know who he is, and begins to make that change and they teach that a different way. So let's fast forward to where we are now. Suppose for a moment that what we have actually done is engaged in a journey to make real to humanity what Jesus taught, and do it in a spiritual way. Being human, we are functioning as Barabbas should have functioned. That is, being in the human body, because the only thing that makes us human is the body and the way we think. We are transforming from being human to being son of a womb. And by doing so, we have abandoned the methods of Barabbas. In that regard, what we have done, we have taken the essence of Barabbas and abandoned his methods and coupled them with the humanness of Jesus. And now we are exposing all of the things that must be corrected. And in doing so, we are tasked with bringing into existence avenues for change so that there will be no more, there won't be a need for the methods of Barabbas, and there won't be another Caesar to come on the scene that will place anyone in bondage. Suppose that that is the task that all of us have been Barabbas in that regard. The African has never, to my knowledge, has never sought to free humanity or itself from bondage the way that Jesus taught, but have always sought the methods of Barabbas. Does that make any sense, guys?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that seems to be consistent with what I was thinking. Barabbas is the son of a boon who doesn't know who it is, and it's functioning from a perspective of the physical because it doesn't know who it is. And Jesus the Christ knows who it is, and that's why he didn't even was not afraid of Caesar, did not defer to Caesar, did not feel the need to argue with Pontius Pilate, because Jesus the Christ knew who he was. And again, I see that Jesus the Christ became both the atonement and the sacrifice that purifies.
So if I'm understanding this, I guess what I'm seeing as you and Pastor are talking is Jesus and Barabbas were two sides of the same coin. And the actions of one promoted the actions of the other. And the becoming means that what happened to both of them had to happen so that the Christ could be elevated and the human in Barabbas could recognize who he is. So both of them, the transformation does not happen in either without the actions of the other.
Ron, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm trying to talk it out. I'm trying to see it.
Yeah,
go ahead. Help me out.
I was definitely seeing it as being extremely symbolical when we think about the idea of Jesus dying for our sins, and then just to go further, what exactly?
Recording in progress.
I don't know why that happened. Yeah, but is that echo? Hello? Okay. Thinking about the idea of Jesus dying for our sins and always being aware of that, they're thinking about what are the sins, and the sins being just entanglements, or the idea, and what are those entanglements? Those entanglements are those things that lock us into only believing that we are human and we are not Elohim. That's what we mean by entanglement. And symbolically, Jesus being chosen as the lot fell on him in terms of the Lord's. Symbolically, it spreaded that word that would untangle many, would untangle Barabbas in that way to help him to understand who he was. And it was actually the crucifixion, so to speak, or even the idea of the crucifixion of Christ that spread that message. It was the catalyst that even has Christ prevalent today, but more importantly, prevalent today in terms of what he actually what Christ represents, that idea, so to speak. And that atonement, of course, with Christ being the atonement as well, it allows Barabbas the opportunity to untangle in a way.
Hi, this is LaVon.
Go ahead, LaVon.
Hi. When Barbara was speaking, and everything today is resonating with the readings that I've done. And one thing, Barbara, that you said, and I just want to get clear, or I want to see if the clarification or the understanding of the symbolic of say, Barabbas, as in reference to the symbolic of the scapegoat. So the wilderness is that mankind not knowing who they are. If he was sent into the wilderness, or the goat was sent into the wilderness, is symbolic of it, is us not knowing who we are, and then until we do know.
To me, that is very similar, because a wilderness is a place that is barren. There is not a lot of life there in terms of the wilderness of this time. It's like similar to a desert type place, and that's where we are when we don't know who we are. We in a wilderness, we try to find food the best we can. We try to survive the best we can. But there is more to life than just survival, is what the Christ shows. There's more to life than just living the physical, in a sense.
Thank you.
I would also add that wilderness also provides an opportunity to find oneself, so to speak, as well, while going through all of those things. So the wilderness is definitely full of potential of growth, elevation, and just remarkable. Forget the word I'm looking for, but anyway, having a breakthrough. That's what all the wilderness represents as well.
And Sheldon, I agree with you that it is a place of a heightened sense of spiritual awareness. And as I'm listening, this is Kathy, by the way, as I am listening to the discussion, I have a lot of thoughts because I'm hearing what everyone is saying, and I'm still trying to see Barabbas as the scapegoat, is the scapegoat, as we've been saying, and it's becoming clearer to me. But I was looking also as you start in Leviticus, it starts by speaking that the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's sons. And as I was looking at what caused Aaron's sons to die, you have to go to that 10th chapter in the first verse, and you see that they tried to enter the presence of the Lord by bringing a strange fire. They called it a strange fire. They made their own sacrifice of fire and tried to bring into the presence of the Lord. And everything we're talking about today is about purification. So they were trying to find their own way of purification. And as I'm listening to the discussion today and everything that we're saying, when I look at son of Abum, I see that the example, if I use Barabbas as the example, he is not perfect, but he is the goat that is chosen to live because, and I'm reading from what I wrote down from what I'm hearing as we speak today, he is the goat that is chosen to live because he has the heart or the spiritual nature in him or the spiritual awareness to bring about spiritual change for the nation. So it's not about whether or not he is perfect in his attitude or whether or not he has committed a crime or not. I'm seeing it as being the ability that he has to bring deliverance and to bring about purification to the nation. He continues to become the sacrificial goat, even though he is supposed to be the goat that is to live. He continues, and I'm speaking now the African in this scenario, to be the sacrificial lamb or to be the sacrificial goat, because his purpose is unknown to him and is denied and rejected by the others. And it says in the scripture that the priests offered up Barabbas. They offered up Jesus because of envy. And what we find is when we look at where we are now and still looking at the African, his purpose is denied and unknown to him. But for those who can see that potential in him, it is rejected because of the envy that they feel toward the African. And if purification is the point, the other point that I wanted to make, we keep saying that the scapegoat is sent into the wilderness. He is not sent into the wilderness. The scripture said a man waits to lead him into the wilderness. Mankind is leading the African who is denying who he is or not understanding who he is. The dictates and the actions and the thinking, the conscious awareness of mankind leads him deeper into that wilderness, not to a place of destruction. But I see it as leading him into that place of wilderness, as Sheldon was making that point. For what? For an opportunity to have a heightened sense of awareness, to come into yourself and to come into the reality of who you are for the purpose of purification, because the burden is up on the African to have to be the heart of the movement, to be the heart of humanity, and to bring about the change not through rituals, not through sacrifices. If the end goal was always to be about purification, then the sons of Aaron had an idea, I'll do it my way. And as a result of that, they died and I'm going to say in this example, they died in the wilderness, so to speak, because they led themselves astray. And everything that we're saying today, I see this as an opportunity for us to come out of the wilderness, to be awakened, to see who we are, and to recognize that the burden that is upon us is to, once I know who I am, to bring about purification through, as we say, putting it in the macro, being the heart of the movement, being the eyes of the movement, everything that we see not become entangled in those things, but doing it the way that the Lord requires, because we keep saying he never required a blood sacrifice, or he never required sacrifices in the way that the priest set it up. So what is the way that is required? It is the way of knowing who you are and being loving kindness in the universe as the son of our womb, being loving kindness and being connected to everything that is in the universe. And that's where I'm seeing it right now. And if I'm off base, correct me, but this is just, I'm listening to what we're saying, I'm writing notes, and this is the way it's opening up to me right now, because humanity is being led astray because we keep trying to take on the identity of others who we are not. And this wilderness is an opportunity for me to no longer be the goat that is slain, but to understand my goal as the scapegoat is to bring about purification according to the edict of the Lord, according to the kingdom principles, according to how things operate according into the kingdom, if that makes sense. So comments, questions, what are we seeing here?
I agree with what you said. As a matter of fact, I think you summed it up beautifully. I see clearly that the wilderness is definitely not knowing who we are. I also see something else there as well, and that is, as long as we engage in Christian practices, we are guilty of crucifying Jesus. As long as we engage in practices, we are guilty of crucifying Jesus and all of the prophets, inclusive of Muhammad. It was not the Roman government that killed Jesus. It was the church. It was religion. And to this day, the religion that killed Jesus, that same attitude, has kept the African bondage. And the attitude that has kept the African in bondage, the preaching of what we call the gospel, which is actually preaching of bondage, submission to the government of this nation, of this world. So what I'm saying is this: the one who has been vilified, Barabbas, is the one who was, but yet he knew that freedom had to be brought to those in bondage. Jesus says to Barabbas in so many words, this is how it's to be done, by putting things in the macro. So what happens is the Romans, meaning the Europeans, take Jesus and uses the words of Jesus to enslave the very ones who don't know who they are. And when you spoke out of the envy, it is the envy of the African that results in the African being in bondage. Why? If that was not so, then why is it that every accomplishment of the African is hidden or destroyed? Why is it that the African has been convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that Jesus lived in Northern Africa and was a European? Why is that so important? Because it gives you a picture of your nothingness that's being presented. What we are dealing with today is more pertinent than anything that we've dealt with in the past. Why? Because for the first time, we are taking a, as Truly was saying, in relationship to the at this point, it has been from the pulpit that we have been taught to stay away from history, stay away from politics, but teaching the Bible. It is impossible to do that and do it justice. What we are seeing today is that Jesus lived in a political society that was unjust. And in order to bring justice to the society in which he lived, that justice be brought to humanity at large, because the least amount of people on the earth in terms of groupings, their attitude was one of bitch. And it is up to the African to fix that. But the African has not been able to fix it because, as you said, the African has spent all of its time trying to please the one who had it in bondage. Every effort, everything that we have made has been to be accepted by the slaveholder, to be accepted into a society that we were never accepted in, and doing it by being human, by possessing things, by based upon where we live, what kind of car we drive, how we look, how we talk, how we relate to each other. All of these things are methods of indoctrination that we have embraced and has separated us from the reality that we are indeed Elohim. We are who we were created to be without knowledge of that. And when we gain knowledge of that, that is when the whole globe is free. Everyone on this earth is free. And that has been recognized by the Caucasian forever and a day. And that is the reason the only messages that the enslaved were permitted to deliver were the messages that were pre-approved by the Caucasian, and to this day, the same is there because of who is reflected in 99% of all the messages delivered. Yes, they end with "Ain't he all right?" but they start with Paul, and Paul is the darling of this society. Paul is the darling of Christianity because Paul taught that slaves were to obey their masters. And if we are true to who we are, we know truly that that's not the words from the heart of our Creator. So what are we saying here today? Now that we realize that we are who we are not traveling into anything as much as we are traveling out of something. The journey is leading us out of the wilderness. Suppose that which we have called the attitude or the scapegoat goes into that wilderness, and when it comes out of that wilderness, it is embraced because it doesn't look like it once looked when it went into the wilderness. It doesn't think the way it thought when it went into the wilderness. It is not making any efforts to deliver itself. It is making every effort to deliver humanity because the one who enslaved is also enslaved. You can't keep me ignorant of myself without being ignorant of yourself. So here we are understanding that the crucifixion of Jesus, as well as the release of Barabbas, has nothing to do with this phony thing called Easter. has everything to do with the deliverance of man from being mere humans. It has everything to do with understanding that absent the body, we are spirit. And embracing the reality that we are spirit, it frees us from walking in the shoes of Barabbas. It shows us how to walk in the shoes of Jesus, resulting in the freedom of humanity itself. Does that make sense?
So are then these not two aspects of the same man, though? Two attitudes, not man,
Yes.
entity. Jesus, the Son of the human, who lived as a divine entity, who lived spiritually. Jesus, the son of Abun, who lived as a man until he went into the wilderness and found and became aware of who he was. So are they not two aspects of the same man?
Absolutely they are. And just like Cain and Abel are two aspects of the same man.
Right. So again, I guess I was going...
In the duality of it.
That's where I was going. The duality there, you can even see it here. And the thing about this duality is that center column, which balances everything to extremes and balances those extremes so that they are one.
Yes. That's one of the reasons we have been so uncomfortable speaking the truth about what exists. If you want to make an African uncomfortable, say something about the African's history in the presence of Caucasians, or say something about the African that is the Caucasian that is an attribute that keeps the African enslaved. And you will find that we as a people begin to whisper. We don't want to say it too loudly. That's a problem. This is beyond physical bondage. This is spiritual bondage that we are battling against right now, that we are fighting to be free from. And when I say we, I'm not talking about just the African itself. I'm talking about to free humanity. Think about it. No one cares about the African. When the last time that you heard of a hate bill being passed in Congress against Africans in America? And you have Asians under public attack for a few weeks, and you have an Asian hate bill passed with no mention of the African who has been under murderous attack ever since it's been in this nation and prior to. But yet we are silent. We have Africans on the floor pushing this bill and not saying anything about us. What does that say? What does that mean when it comes to the human or spiritual nature of the African itself? And I am beyond the struggle. I am beyond the struggle of making statements about the reality of what's in the scriptures. I'm beyond that. Because when we really think about it, the scriptures, the holy books, be it the Quran or be it what we call the Bible, it matters not. The holy books speaks to and about the African, period, people of color, period. The only time that it has any connection with Europeans is when Europeans put people of color in bondage. What am I saying to you? I am saying that this has been our guidepost forever and a day, and we're just now beginning to embrace that. This is not about the exclusion of anybody, but it is about the inclusion of everyone. And it is incumbent upon us to recognize that the deliverance from the attitude of bondage, the deliverance from the attitude of destruction, we have to deliver humanity from that. When we look at what happened on January 6th, we see the brutality, but at the same time, we see those who in power are justifying it, and where you say, well, there's some of them or not. That's not true. The Democrats are giving lip service, but no, they're doing nothing else. So what am I saying? I'm saying that until we come face to face with the reality that Caucasians would do anything it takes to stay in power and to keep people of color in bondage, until we come to grips with that, are we truly traveling the journey that would deliver all of us spiritually? This is not about picking up a gun. This is not about going to Congress. This is about becoming aware of who we are and dealing with it dealing with it the way it was intended to be dealt with. We come out of the wilderness based upon a journey of truth. We cannot get to the edge of the wilderness and think that we have arrived and began to placate others by making them feel like they are right in what they are doing and saying when they are wrong. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about the Caucasian, I'm talking about the African also, especially at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. That is the period of the greatest level of indoctrination that we ever received. And everything that we teach can be traced back to the writers of the scriptures who were racist, and they made no bones about it being racist. So we are embarked on this discussion, and I think it's leading us into a deeper understanding of who we are. And embracing it makes us stronger and gives us a greater position to bring about balance to this earth. My gauge of balance is seeing people like Mitch McConnell and well, I don't see any hope for Donald, but having a change of heart about who they are. I don't long for anyone to transition out of the earth without knowing who they are. I don't long for that, but I do wish that whatever it takes, inclusive of our transition to this earth, for them to see who they are, because I believe that their ancestors speak to them, but they disregard it. So anyway, I'm done for a while.
So who is that? The man who died of COVID, black man who was that Herman Cain? It was Herman Cain. Okay. Because we had this conversation before. Well, similar to that, idea that if someone should not be in the earth, then they should leave. But I remember noticing that Herman Cain died. And I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that his whole persona was to emulate sort of Caucasian corporatism, and how that sort of desire is itself the thing that prevents the sort of true liberation of African people. And that desire itself is the thing that sort of cuts you off from any sort of infusion of or return to awareness of spirit. And I wonder if of all the people that passed away relatively recently, it would be somebody like him as opposed to a Mitch McConnell type figure.
You mean pass away and bring about change as a result of this, no way?
Yeah. Or in this case, not so obvious as political, but whatever energy is sort of entering the earth and having an influence over the people in it would not be sort of clogged up by that, those sort of material desires. But that idea is not fully formed for me. I was just wondering about that situation and whether it's related. And I believe it is, but just wondering.
What is the meaning of the number?
Say it again, you broke up. What is the meaning of what?
9.
Nine is it's the completion of all numbers, the multiplicity of all things before a sort of realization that all things are contained in the one, and the one is represented by all things. It is the last stage of development before the reconnection and the sort of reconstituting of the one, which is 10, which is just an amplification of the one. So 9 is like the full extent of all iterations that the one takes.
See if you can couple that with Herman Cain, the attitude you tried with Cain. You remember his little 999?
999 plan. Yeah.
And the 3 times 9 is 772. You know?
Huh.
And with him representing of the African.
Yeah.
Well, with that 999, Nick is saying that seeing the number 999 indicates that you should look towards the future and prepare to close a chapter of your life. It says also number 999 may symbolize a changing of the guards, or whatever that may resonate or may mean.
So are we? So are we at that point of the changing of the guard? No. Only the teachers, please write your questions down, Amir.
Yes, and I would see that, changing of the guard. I mean, we've been going through, a time of, seeking that everything comes to the light, and look at the changes that are taking place, in the cosmos, in our world. And, I think, that's significant at this time, at this point in time. Yeah.
or comments? I'm curious as to what you're seeing in relationships with the where we start. Ron, are you there?
Oh, I think you broke up a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't what you said, but I'm here.
I said I wonder what you're thinking now in relationship to where we started.
This has been extremely insightful. I like how the conclusion, and just putting it in my own words. I just see us as coming out of the wilderness being the place where you find yourself, where you recognize who you are. And as you said, you come out not appearing, at least to yourself, the way you did when you went in. I don't know how to put it all in words, but I think this is very enlightening. I like the discussion.
I mean, think about this. Jesus, yeah. What'd you say wrong?
Nothing. I like the maturation of Barabbas through the discussion, and seeing him in a totally different light, because Barabbas has always been sort of an enemy of the Bible when you read that story. But I see it now as a sincerity of man wanting what was best for the people, but going about it in a very political way, in a very human way. And that's all. I just see it all different now. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Jesus was the Word, right? And Jesus was the Word, and Jesus being beaten beyond recognition is no different than what has been done to the written word itself, is it?
Absolutely. What we hear today is
comment, questions?
I'd love to hear a short summary from Barbara. She has the best wrap-ups and summaries.
From who?
From you, Barbara.
The thing that I see is that this again is saying that we're all one. There are different aspects of us that have to be balanced. And some people reflect attitudes that may be non-spiritual, but if I am my brother's keeper, which I am, and you too, my sister, that it's only when we are balanced that we can understand aspects of imbalance, if that resonates. It's only when we're balanced that we can have compassion for those and for ourselves who are imbalanced. So with Jesus the Christ and Jesus Barabbas, I see them as aspects of the same entity, but with differing means and different ways of approaching their goals. But I think that the thing that affirms to me that the journey is open to all, I think, is when Kathy reminded us about the wilderness and how there's an opportunity, if you will, for deep spiritual insight when you're alone and when you're not distracted by a lot of things. There's an opportunity to really get in touch with spiritually who you are. And at that point, then you have Barabbas, the son of a broom, who's living as a man, coming out of the wilderness and being Barabbas, son of a broom, living as the son of a broom.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Ron mentioned, I think it was Ron mentioned earlier about the sacrifice of Abel, and I'm thinking about, or have been thinking about Cain, and how Cain, I guess, is seen today in many of those, well, not but those things that were mentioned a little while ago, like when Nick mentioned Herman Cain, in terms of the capitalism as well as what we would consider religion, and the priest actually turned into as well, which is the selfishness of essentially just looking out for self. And with that selfishness of looking out for self, disassociation or not acknowledging that oneness for a portion of the self. And what I mean by that is Cain was jealous of what Abel had and did not see what we have, but what Cain, have versus what Abel have, and then was therefore willing to, in a sense, kill him. And in the same terms, that is the same attitude or the willingness of capitalism, the Herman Cains, the priests that we're talking about, in terms of in this sense, the true salvation of the people's soul, to take advantage of them for their own personal gain. And when it was mentioned, this is a lot of thoughts. I don't know how it's coming out, but that supposedly sacrifice that has been made, and many times when there's been I would say the sacrifices were not even the same in the Old Testament. What I mean by that, and across this world, there's the sacrifice that took place when you were willing to, not in the sense to lose something else of your own, but to kill something, so to speak, or like, let's say, for example, another citizen for your own personal gain, versus there being more so a spiritual sacrifice. And I hesitate to say that, but in terms of spiritual sacrifice, I guess, for an example, a true sacrifice would have been instead Cain not sacrificing himself, but sacrificing the idea of being an individual, so to speak, or losing the individuality to gain oneness. Though Jesus was not making a sacrifice in the sense that we think of, what he was doing was pure of heart and of that for mankind, even though he did, that's where essentially his heart was, even though he did not think this was a sacrifice, like I'm dying for my sins, for your sins, excuse me, I'm going to cease to exist, because he already knew that he came, was here in the physical, but he understood and knew that he was God in the physical, and therefore not losing anything, so to speak, but his heart was different. And I'm just trying to understand, or I guess caught up in a way, the connection with those things that I just said in everything that we've talked about this morning. I'm done.
Anyone else?
One thing I was, I'm sorry, this is LaVon. The one thing that, it could be because of my own personal journey and this wilderness thing, is that as I was reading, I never heard any more or couldn't find anything else that happened with Barabbas. And so from listening to everyone, I'm thinking, or I'm believing, or maybe I'm using the wrong words, but anyway, that it was symbolic of the scapegoat that went into the wilderness. And as you said earlier, Pastor, if he came out of that wilderness different, unrecognizable, then possibly that's why there's no other mention of him after this happened. I'm just trying to curious about what happened to him.
That would make sense.
I was just going to say, I think that's the beauty of it all. We are the ones that get to bring balance to it. Though whoever seeks to understand it, whoever has the desire to understand it and to shed light on it for mankind, that's the key, not for selfish reasons, but for all of mankind, get to bring balance to that and gets to say what happened to Barabbas. And Barabbas is he who finds himself, sees that he is enlightenment, sees that he is the son of a boom, and recognizes that and what that means for the entire universe. So I think that is the conclusion that understanding brings to all of this. We get to finish this scripture.
And you know, and Ron, and my thoughts were in terms of just our own, you know, again, thoughts about this. You know, did he come back as, you know, like the prodigal son? Did he come back, you know, where someone who might have been pardoned, you know, from a crime that has spent years, you know, in jail, has been released, and all of the things that he needed to do to show that, you know, he's worthy of release? Do we give that person a second chance? And so it just was in my mind, you know, how do we see it for ourselves? And so it made me think of it in that way, if that resonates with anybody. I'm done.
And George,
I actually think George said, when you finish, Ron, go ahead. I'll see what.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to, I think Barabbas, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, I think Barabbas came out of the wilderness. And when we look at spiritually, is my belief, Barabbas just came out of the wilderness.
Okay.
Say again?
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said.
Can you repeat it, Pastor?
I said, I think that Barabbas just came out of the wilderness today. And when we look at it spiritually, this Can you guys hear me?
No, you're cutting out.
Yeah, you cut it out. The last thing we heard is when you look at it spiritually.
Oh. I was saying when you look at it spiritually, I think Barabbas just came out of the wilderness. Did I cut out?
Okay. No, we heard you.
Okay. Yeah, when we look at it from that, from that perspective, I do believe that Barabbas has been in the wilderness until now, because no one has ever really looked at it. And honestly, I do believe that we are the that vanguard that has readily taken upon us the responsibility for not just bringing them out of the wilderness, but for carrying the burden for humanity, so that humanity itself can become as Barabbas is now, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
I also have a interesting thought. I think of looking at this in the comparison to Cain and Abel, and as been stated, being two sides to every coin, to the same coin. Excuse me. Looking at the aspect of what happened, the Abel was the catalyst of what if Cain does not become whole until he kills Abel. And you look at that in the case of Jesus and Barabbas being two sides of the same coin, or duality of man fighting for his spirituality. What happens with Jesus is you have to also give Barabbas credit for his insurrection of being the catalyst of driving all that to happen, although that is not what is stated in Scripture, if you can see them as being two sides of the same coin. So in that regard, when you look at it that way, his responsibility, and all of it is done in his sincerity, you see then that not only does Barabbas come out of the wilderness, but he comes out of the wilderness as the son of a boom who recognizes that he is the Christ. So all of it comes together, and the wholeness of him is what is unrecognizable, because he truly is not the same creature that went in the beginning. I'm done. Does that make sense at all?
That makes plenty of sense, at least to me, Ron. Because as I'm thinking about it, and as we were just connecting that to Barabbas, I keep messing up his name. Somebody say his name.
Barabbas.
Barabbas, thank you. Even with Cain, it is important, what I think also to go to what Pastor Richard just said, what we are doing here in terms of Barabbas and Cain. We are recognizing and helping to lift the supposed quote unquote sin that they were or represented, which was just an entanglement. And with us recognizing that we are redeeming them and we are helping them, or right now making them whole, so to speak, not only them, but also within ourselves in terms of forgiveness, and also that of the world, so to speak. And that is what Pastor Richard was just talking about in terms of us taking the next step, or in a sense, literally writing spiritually the next thing that took place with Barabbas. We're doing that, or have been doing that now in this particular moment. We have been bringing the balance. But first, they had to be recognized as not just sin, recognized as just not doing some abhorrent thing, some terrible, quote unquote, ungodly thing. I'm done.
Anyone else?
And perhaps that's part of what our goal is and our intent is, to see the imbalances, even in all of the, not only in the biblical stories, but in the day-to-day physical existence, to understand the imbalances and to balance them, because creation is ongoing, and the story is a continuous story. It's continuously unfolding, and how we choose to balance it is part of the unfolding. Done. Thanks.
As I was thinking, redemption brings balance. Redemption brings wholeness, and that is what you just mentioned. Bringing redemption.
So, with the question that was raised, Ron says he did not have an answer to give to his friend. Now, would that answer take hours to give, or would that answer be a brief statement that only takes a few moments? Or does it warrant it, to be honest with you, because maybe the answer itself was no answer to prompt this discussion, which does not lead to questions, a question rather by your friend, right? What do you think? And he may have gotten the answer in the macro.
I agree, and I think I really and truly think I really and truly think that his question or his study of this was, in a spiritual sense, intended for today, more so than for him. And I will talk to him again, I'm sure, soon, but I will not bring this up. I don't, I think I can put it in words, but I'm not sure that this is where he is. If he desires to hear it, he'll bring it up, and I'll let him do that. I don't know if he's. We have we've been friends since childhood, but we have a weird relationship, and I don't want this to be combative or something that's going to be heated. So I'll just play it out and see if it's something that he needs to hear from me, or let him get it from the universe if he really desires to hear it. And does that sound harsh? I don't mean it to.
No,
I hope you understand.
I don't think it sounds harsh at all. in terms of him even being receptive to hearing what it is that you have to say, it sounds like you're just trying to, you're making space and yielding and being there in whatever way you have to or need to be, but it's not you, excuse me, that determines that. Is more so where he is that actually determines that. And by you creating that space, you are being what you need to be at the moment or in this particular situation. So if anything, you are more so acting like, I guess in a sense, water or catering to where he is. So no, I don't think that's harsh at all.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want it to be a competition, and I think that's what it may turn into. And there's something I learned from Pastor some years ago, how to answer questions with questions. And maybe I'll do that and get him to follow his lead. From if he truly wants to understand, and let's see where that goes, rather than to me to try to give it to him word for word.
I'm glad. I like that approach, and the reason being is because this whole idea of competition is one of the most destructive things that our society has engendered. It's one thing to be competitive on the ball field, but it's another thing to be competitive to the point where it becomes destructive to our relationship, or it becomes a blinder to what the truth is. Because when we do that, we seemingly we close our ears to everything ought to be. Things that I have made every effort to do is to be open to whatever is said or whatever questions raised. But it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to give a response simply because I'm open to hearing it. I do believe that, well, our brothers keepers mean all our brothers protectors. We don't have a right to condemn anyone for anything in terms of their beliefs. But I also believe that because of our discussions, not only with our eyes being open, doors are also being closed. The doors of indoctrination are being closed. I believe that the largest encampment of indoctrinators has been shut down by COVID. And it has allowed people to refocus and shift their focus from the church issues. I've asked people, why do you go to church? And they tell me everything from I want to go to heaven to I want to learn more about God. And my response is, why do you want to learn about God and not about yourself? And what you going to church, what did you learn in church that you didn't already know the week before? Those kinds of things are the questions that I raise, but at the same time not condemning. Why? Because I just believe so strongly that the foundation of all of these religious things that have begun to fall apart, one of the things that I saw during the course of this week that undergirds what I'm saying is how this Jewish guy in America organized a group and financed this group to stand against what Israel was doing to the Palestinians and actually siding with the Palestinians for the first time. That seems to be something benign or a political move. However, I see something much deeper in that, because honestly, it has never happened this way before. So there are cracks in these religious organizational structures. And I think today has really, truly removed the foundation from them, that because that foundation had been built upon this belief system about who Jesus is. And you cannot talk about who Jesus is without talking about Barabbas, even though you may not even mention his name, because both of them are so inextricably tied together. Questions or comments about that? Okay, if there are no questions or no comments, then can we do tomorrow as the day of Q&A from those who have questions? What do you think about that?
I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay. So tomorrow, that's what we'll do. When we come on tomorrow at 11, we will begin with a Q&A from today. And that does not mean that those of, the teachers, of course, may have questions as well. And any thoughts that you may have, after mulling this over during the course of this day and night, should be brought to the forefront tomorrow too, I think. And having said that, I'm appreciative of your time. And I do believe that we are in a space that has been reserved for us from the foundation of everything that is. And filling that space is going to benefit humanity tremendously. I'm looking forward to experiencing the changes as a result of our discussion. That's it.
Excellent discussion, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting and insightful. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So to those who are on, who were not in the discussion, one of the reasons I wanted to do, I felt like I needed to do this, honestly. There was a very strong urge to do this. And it was so that you could experience how the discussions that we have about scriptures and the sometimes intense discussions and the different of understandings that we have, because we do know this, there is only one truth. When people say things like, you can prove anything you want with the Bible, that's not true. You can misinterpret anything you want and say what it means, but it doesn't make it right. So you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I intend to do the same. And I look forward to talking with you on tomorrow.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone,
Great day,
have a
everybody.
great day.
JJ, your mama should come home.
Thanks, Sheldon.
JJ, right now.